Thank you, Molly, and everybody at Outlier for accepting my talk and for all the hard work that you've put into getting this conference together. I'm Nigel, and I thought since this is recorded, it might be more relaxing for you not to see me talking in that little box up in the corner. But I am alive and will be here for questions afterwards, live and in person. I'm going to talk about two of my all-time graphic heroes, Otto Neurath and Gerd Arntz. First, let me take you back thousands of years. You are kneeling. It's dark, but you have a candle. The ceiling is low. It's only about 4 feet, actually. And you are painting. And this is what you are painting. And this is how long ago you were painting it. This painting of the bull was found in a Borneo cave long time ago. And it was thought to be the oldest figurative art ever discovered that was made by a human. Until, and this is a problem with preparing a talk and then being eclipsed by news. Very recently, in just last month, in January, there was a new discovery disclosed of a warty hog found in a cave in Sulawesi, and that is uranium dated to be from 15,000 years earlier. It's 45,500 years old. It's important to note that these are the earliest representational, figurative examples of human art so far found. Abstract marks have been found in the Bombas cave in South Africa, and they have been uranium dated to be between 70 and 100,000 years old. Now, 44,000 years ago was when Homo sapiens finally replaced Neanderthals. Experts argue whether this bull and this hog were painted by one of us, that is Homo sapiens, or by an early hominid such as Neanderthal, or perhaps by the pygmy-sized people, so-called hobbit people who lived in Asia about the same time. By the way, most of us have a little Neanderthal in us. We can tell that because, or we know that, I know that, because of the genographic project that National Geographic put together a few years ago. I was interested to see that I am actually 1.7% Neanderthal, as well as a whole lot of other things. Being slightly Neanderthal maybe helps my friends understand some of my odder quirks. But let's move a little closer to today, and another bull, this one from Chauvet, the cave in the Ardèche region of France. I just want to have a little word about how the public saw what the cave painters had done. When the Lascaux cave, this one, was first discovered in 1940, the art was photographed, but at another famous site, Altamira, where the cave art was painted around the same time as Lascaux, photography was not available when that art was first seen in 1875, the art in Altamira. These are the drawings by the discoverer, Sans de Sautola, and which he did after coming out of the cave a few years later in 1880. But the most well-known artist who copied the Altamira paintings was Henri Breu, and his art was the way that people now think of as cave paintings, largely. And I'm amazed that art history books will still caption them to say that these were the paintings in the caves. Look at this. Animals painted some 15,000 years ago in Altamira and in the Fontaine in France. But no, they weren't. They were painted about 120 years ago. Here's Breyer painting from Altamira, which he made in 1906. This is actually what he saw. So you see, he's kind of romanticized it and simplified it and done a few things that he thought the cave painters were intending. And actually, this is what he saw, because this painting was on the ceiling of one of the parts of the cave. Remember how this was done. You're kneeling down, or you're lying down even, and reaching up and painting. So what has all this got to do with information design? Well, let's speed forward from Altamira 15,000 years to this man, Otto Neurath, with his fiery red beard. Neurath was a social scientist who wanted to find a new visual way to educate the people of his native Vienna using information graphics. This is the kind of awful chart that was around at the time. And I don't need to point out to this audience, at least, the awful mistakes, the graphic mistakes, the graphic no-nos that you shouldn't do. You shouldn't just increase the height of something to indicate a difference. Otto Neurath was proposing a completely different system, which he called Isotype. And this stood in for, I beg your pardon, the initial letters were International System of Typographic Picture Education. His first charts were visual, but they were a bit of a mess. You can see this is police arrests in Vienna in February 1925. The darker figures are those who have been arrested under the influence of alcohol. And the light figures, the unshaded figures, are without the influence of alcohol. In other words, they were just naughty people who were arrested, whereas the darker toned people were naughty and drunk. In 1926, Otto Neurath went to an art exhibition and met this guy, Gerd Arntz, whose work was almost exclusively black and white and was made with lino cuts. And he realized that Arntz's figures in his lino cuts would be the perfect way to show the kind of data that he, Otto, wanted to show in his information graphics. Otto Neurath asked him to come and work with him, which he did a couple of years later. Gerd was obviously a fun-loving guy. Here he is with his wife and Heinrich Höhler. Now, although Gerd himself didn't need to be told this, Otto urged all the artists who worked with him on Isotype to find the essence of the object or the animal or the car or the factory or the tractor, whatever it was that they were drawing. And usually this meant choosing a side view, a profile, a silhouette. The artist should think of a shadow that the object would cast and draw that instead of getting bogged down in the surface details. So if you're going to draw the essence of a cat, you wouldn't just trace around a picture of the cat. You draw the cat from the side with its typical elements that are the essence of the cat, that make this the cat, whether it's the ear or the tail or the stance or the little snub nose, whatever it was, that was what Otto Neurath wanted his artists to do when they were making icons for him, for his charts. Now, drawing the essence of an animal was exactly what the cave painters were doing thousands of years before Otto and Gerd. Here from the Lascaux cave, 2 horses. And here's what Gerd Arntz did. For himself, I'm sure, quite naturally, but not necessarily for all the artists who worked for Otto. Now, the reason you do this is that when you're recording something, it's the essential details that will get your idea over faster. Cave art is not art for art's sake. It is messaging. In the beginning, Otto wanted the artists working with him to cut the images from black paper. That way, they would have to make simpler images. Gerd Arntz changed this paper cutting directive to his more familiar way of making images, which was lino cuts. Here's a piece of lino and the resulting image. I was lucky and fortunate enough to meet Gerd Arntz's son, Peter, a few years ago. And here, these are his hands, holding one of his father's lino cuts and the print from it. And I had to leave some sort of proof that I was there. Those are my glasses. But wait, there's more. One of the clever things that Otto did was to combine 2 icons into one. And it might seem obvious today that this man can very easily become a chemist by the simple addition of a chemical retort. Or the man can become anything. He can become a chemist, a waiter, a tanner, a surveyor, a weaver, a miner, a steel worker, a baker, a tailor, a sawmill worker. Well, whether Otto knew it or not, they were doing this back in the Chauvet caves. In one part, you can see this woolly rhino, this drawing of a woolly rhino, and you can see the same animal nearby with marks on its body that represent its summer coat. In summer, folds in the skin of the woolly rhino were visible, but this is not a drawing of those folds. It's a shorthand graphic code for folds. Again, it's the essence of the animal in summer. And here is the same thing going on with a man becoming a chemist. Now, here's the timeline brought up today, of course, with the warty hog. I'd never forget that. My point is simple. Cave painters were the first information designers. Now, I know that's a cliche, I know, but I don't care. As the New York Times said in its review of the great animated recent movie Soul, the movie isn't immune to or afraid of cliché, and nor should we be. Cave painters were the first information designers because they were the first information designers. They were counting, they were recording, they were explaining, they were storytelling while showing only the essentials, which is a pretty good definition of information design. And I'm glad that my two graphic heroes, plus the others in the Isotype team, especially Otto's wife, Marie, continued and renewed the work of their ancestors. On the timelines you've seen here, I've used the word today to describe Otto and Gerd's work from the 1920s and 30s, about 100 years ago. But given that the divisions of the timelines represent 1,000 years, it's hard to show that Isotype was created just 100 years ago, even if I come a little closer. So what about right now, in 2021, 100 years after Gerd's Red Bull? A quick Google search shows that what started out all those thousands of years ago lives on in road signs all over the world. Not to mention what goes on in airports and on toilets and with emojis, although I prefer if emojis were a little simpler. But I like to think about this fantastic, direct visual link we have to our ancestors, a 44,000-year-old connection that we can actually see. If you'd like to read more with some additional thoughts that I've had recently and the sources that I've used for this piece, send me an email. Please put Outlier in the subject line. I'll send you a PDF of what I've done, but I'm still writing it, so please be patient. And if you have a question, but are in a different time zone, happily asleep at the moment, email me anyway, and I'll try to answer your questions. Thank you for having me.